it's not getting any colder and the floods are coming. So you can either grab an Ark, hopefully with air conditioning, or you can read these dozen or so books that'll help you navigate the climate crisis. And this includes a few gems you probably haven't heard of, plus my favorite book at the end. So I'm going to start with the OG, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. 1962, kickstarted the environmental movement, removed DDT from the world, kickstarted the EPA. It's the mother of all the other books behind it. And number 2, Merchants of Doubt. Amazing book, 2010. And this is about how industries manufacture doubt in order to keep exploiting consumers and the environment. So this looks at smoking, it looks at fossil fuels, it looks at the ozone layer, and obviously it looks at climate change stuff. And how whenever you hear people say, well, we're not sure what the science says, they're just manufacturing doubt. And the sad thing is that this is science's superpower, but also its Achilles heel, where science is based on doubt. The scientific method is all about doubt, but then you can use it to say, we don't know. And so these next two are from Václav Smil, and this third book is one that I actually have in person. I have almost everything on Kindle, but I buy some of my books so that I can have them on my little bookshelf behind me and I can give them to friends. And so this is an amazing book by Václav Smil. And as you can see up here, Bill Gates says, there's no author whose books I look forward to more than Václav Smil. It's amazing. This is A Beginner's Guide to Energy. It's a short book. Look at that. It's like 200 pages. It's amazing. And you can see the contents here. It is energy in our minds, how we think about energy. Then energy in the biosphere is the next chapter, all about how nature works. Then energy in human history, thinking about muscles, tools, and machines. Energy in the modern world, talking about fossil fuel civilization. And then energy in everyday life, thinking about eating, emailing, what that all costs. And then finally, energy in the future, renewables, trends, and unknowns. Okay, so the fourth book, another one by Václav Smil called Energy and Civilization, A History. This is written in 1994 and it's like 550 pages. So it's a beast of a book, but it's amazing. And it really tells the story of how we move from just our own bodies providing most of the energy to then domesticating plants and animals, which allows us to both eat a lot more, but also use animal power for everything. And then we got obviously fossil fuels, which had first, coal turning heat to work and having all these steam engines. And then later we had oil making combustion engines in the world. The fifth book is called The Prize by Daniel Yergin. This is another way to understand energy. Daniel's written 3 great books about oil, and this one is a history of the 20th century told through oil. So when you think about World War I transitioning into fossil fuels, World War II is all about oil. Then you had OPEC and the Middle Eastern countries with oil. Cold War was always about oil. And obviously today, thinking about fracking, that's a lot about oil and natural gas. So this is a great book to understand the 20th century through the lens of energy. But in addition to understanding energy, you also have to understand the materials of civilization. And so this 6th book, Material World by Ed Conway, looks at the 6 raw materials that shape modern civilization. So here is salt, oil, sand for silicon transistors, lithium for electric batteries, iron obviously for steel and everything, and then copper again for the electrification of the world. So this is an amazing book to understand the constraints of materials that we need going forward into the 21st century. But of course, everything that's atomic is economic. Everything that's physical is political. And so as we electrify the world, that affects geopolitics. So 7th book, called Cobalt Red, is all about how the blood of the Congo powers our lives. And the Congo's been screwed over for at least 100 years. The Democratic Republic of Congo is where King Leopold got all that rubber out of there. He killed like half the population. And there's a similar thing, kind of a neocolonial thing that's happening now in Congo with China getting lots of cobalt out for all of our batteries. Now we can talk about the impacts themselves. And so the 8th book is by Elizabeth Colbert. And this book is kind of an early keystone in climate change. So it was written in 2014. It's all about how we've had these 5 extinctions before in the last, 500 million years, and we're now causing this 6th extinction by humans. So as you can see here, there are these 5 mass extinctions in Earth's history: the end of the Ordovician, the late Devonian, the end of the Permian, the end of the Triassic, and then the end of the Cretaceous. That was when the asteroid hit us, or really hit the dinosaurs. And then finally, we have this future near-term extinction rates are driven by human actions today. That's the 6th extinction. And here's a chart that shows the extinction rate of animals now. In general, you don't have that much of an extinction rate over time, but recently, more and more animals are becoming extinct. And so we're probably going to have something like 15% of species go extinct by 2100. But already in terms of full population loss, we've had about 60% of wild animals have died in the industrial era. But Elizabeth also has this other book called Under a White Sky, The Nature of the Future. And this is about what humans are trying to do about climate change, but also the unintended consequences of all of it. So for example, by putting lots of levees around the Mississippi River, we stop flooding, but then it means that the delta doesn't get as much sediment. And that's a huge issue. The title Under a White Sky is all about geoengineering and how we're going to try to start to stop climate change on Earth by putting mirrors in the sky and clouds in the sky so that more light reflects back into space. Okay, so that's the 9th book. And the 10th and 11th book are by this guy, Jeff Goodell, who talks about the impacts of climate. And his first one is maybe 2017, called The Water Will Come, Rising Seas, Sinking Cities, and the Remaking of the Civilized World. This is like day after tomorrow vibes, and it is one of the big impacts of climate, which is sea level rise. Then Jeff wrote this other book called The Heat Will Kill You First, Life and Death on a Scorched Planet. And this is all about hot bulb temperatures and how, in addition to sea level rise, we're also going to experience way too much warmth. But let's talk about some solutions now. So book 12 is called Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming, by Paul Hawken. And this is a great movement by Paul that then turned into a book. And so Paul helps run this organization called Project Drawdown, and they have this big list of all of these amazing kind of cost-benefit ways that we can reduce CO2 emissions. And so you can see in here, number 6 is educating girls and family planning, because then you have less kids. And then we got some rooftop solar, number 10, and these wind turbines and stuff like that. So these are a bunch of good technologies and also social technologies that will help us navigate and mitigate climate change. Book 13 is by our boy Bill Gates, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And this book is all about the green premium, which is this great idea, which is to make everything green in the world, you have to make it cheaper than the alternative. And so as you can see here, here's the cost for ground beef, and then here's the cost for plant-based alternatives. And so the difference between these is the green premium. But with stuff like solar, as those costs get down lower and lower, then it just doesn't make any sense to put new coal plants in the ground and we can just do solar plants. That will hopefully happen for everything in the world, including meat and solar and electric cars and all of the above. Book 14 is about the policy side. So this is called Designing Climate Solutions, a policy guide for low carbon energy. And they have this great website too that I'll link below that allows you to look at any policy that you could implement and the impacts on CO2. Book 15 and 16 are a little bit more spiritual, emotional, a little bit more vibey. And so the first one is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which really spread in the communities to say, hey, how do Indigenous folks relate to the environment and how can we relate more lovingly to the natural world? And then you have a similar book by Richard Powers, and he has a couple of these books that are about our relationship to nature. And so this one, The Overstory, is about our relationship to trees. I was just in Sequoia recently, and trees are amazing. And then finally, my favorite book on this list is actually Six Faces of Globalization, Who Wins, Who Loses, and Why It Matters by Anthea Roberts and Nicholas Lamp. This is one of my favorite books, and I've interviewed Anthea Roberts on my podcast about it. So what this book does is it looks at these 6 faces of globalization. It looks at the establishment narrative. It looks at the left-wing populist narrative. It looks at the right-wing populist narrative. It looks at the corporate power narrative, it looks at the geoeconomic narrative, and it looks at the global threats narrative. And so these are different narratives that exist in our world, and they're used all the time. Sometimes the left will be like, oh, don't forget about the unions. Sometimes the establishment people will be like, it's a win-win world. We're just trying to be neoliberal globalists here. And so the reason why this book is crucial and why I added it into this climate change books talk is because whenever you're talking from this global threats narrative, you need to be aware that there are these other narratives that you're going to have to compete against or be in collaboration with in order to get stuff done. So for example, if you want to build more solar in the US, you have to do that from a global threats perspective where you say, hey, it's getting too hot. We shouldn't be burning oil and coal anymore. But you also have to be in alignment with, hey, what about the techno-optimists and the establishment? Let's do that. Oh, what about left-wing populism? Hey, this is not going to be something where just like the rich get richer. Instead, it's going to be some great solar thing that puts more money into the hands of working class people. And same with the right-wing populists where you say, look, this is going to be rural Texas and rural America. We're going to turn these coal plants into new jobs for rural folks. You can also be a corporate power person and say, hey, this is not just going to enrich these big multinational corporations, but we're going to put money into smaller corporations. And then finally, geoeconomically, you can say, hey, we need to onshore our production. We need to compete with China. And so we need to get more solar here. So yeah, those are 17 of my favorite climate books. The two that I'd recommend to start with are this amazing book on energy by Václav Smil, 200 pages, perfect. And then if you want to be an amazing pluralist and really up-level your game, check out Six Faces of Globalization. Thank you, as always, for watching. And thank you to Roots donors for supporting this channel. If you want to understand more about the past and how we got here, check out the previous videos here. And if you want to understand the future and where we're going, feel free to subscribe here. Hope to see you then. Bye.